The year was 2375, and humanity had expanded its frontier to what was once considered the infinite edge of space. In the Lyra star system, the UES Pathfinder survey ship was methodically mapping potential colony planets, its powerful sensors sweeping across the cold vacuum, probing for signs of habitability. Captain Marcus Hale stood on the observation deck, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of tactical displays as he watched the slow rotation of Lyra 4 below. "Another barren rock," he muttered, more to himself than to Lieutenant Aaron Lee, who stood beside him monitoring the weapon system's diagnostic. "Perhaps not entirely barren, sir," responded Lieutenant Lee, his eyes fixed on the readout. "Atmospheric composition shows traces of complex carbon compounds, not hospitable by human standards, but possibly indicative of some form of life," Captain Hale finished, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice. This was why they were out here, after all, to discover, to explore, to push the boundaries of human knowledge further into the unknown. The Pathfinder had been commissioned as part of Earth's interstellar fleet's new Frontier-class vessels, kilometer-long behemoths designed primarily for deep space survey missions, with limited defensive capabilities but extensive sensor arrays. The Pathfinder represented humanity's peaceful intentions in the cosmos. "Captain," a voice called from across the bridge. It was Dr. Elena Cruz, the ship's signal research team leader and quantum linguistics expert. Her dark eyes were wide with an emotion Hale couldn't immediately identify. "I think you need to see this." Dr. Cruz led Captain Hale to her workstation, where complex mathematical sequences scrolled across multiple screens. "We've detected an unusual radio signal emanating from Lyra 4, she explained, her voice hushed with anticipation. "The pattern contains complex mathematical sequences that cannot be naturally occurring." Major Sarah Voss, the Fleet Scout officer, approached with her own analysis. "The signal carries an artificial structure, sir. It doesn't match any frequency established by humans." Captain Hale studied the scrolling data, his mind racing with implications. After decades of searching the stars for signs of intelligent life, could this be humanity's first contact? "Distance to source?" he asked. "Approximately 340,000 kilometers, sir," replied Major Voss, "originating from the far side of Lyra 4. Hale made his decision. "Bring us in at safe approach velocity. Dr. Cruz, I want your team working on decoding those initial signal patterns. Let's see if we can establish some form of basic communication." As the Pathfinder adjusted its course, Dr. Cruz and her team worked feverishly to analyze the mysterious signal. Hours passed, and the ship moved steadily closer to Lyra 4. The bridge crew maintained a tense silence, each person acutely aware of the historic significance of the moment. "Captain," Dr. Cruz called suddenly, her voice strained, "I've managed to decode portions of the signal. It's concerning." Hale moved quickly to her station. "Explain." "The signal appears to be military in nature," she said, pointing to specific sequence patterns. "Based on the mathematical structure, I believe it originates from what they call the Calarian Empire. From what I can piece together, Lyra 4 is serving as a temporary outpost for a Calarian fleet that's on its way to conquer what they refer to as primitive worlds." The atmosphere on the bridge grew heavy with this revelation. "How certain are you of this interpretation?" Hale asked. "The mathematical patterns are unmistakable," Dr. Cruz replied. "The signal contains references to standardization of unconquered star systems. Captain, I believe we've stumbled upon an Imperial expansion force." As the Pathfinder approached Lyra 4 more closely, Major Voss deployed long-range sensors to assess the situation. What they discovered sent a chill through the entire crew. A Calarian fleet, consisting of 12 massive Dreadnought-class warships in low orbit around the planet. "Each of those vessels is approximately 20 kilometers in length," reported Lieutenant Lee, his voice barely concealing his shock. Their energy signatures are unprecedented. Our entire ship could fit inside one of their weapon bays. Captain Hale called an emergency meeting with his senior officers in the tactical planning room. The holographic display showed the positioning of the Calarian fleet in relation to the Pathfinder. Options? Hale asked, looking at each officer in turn. We could attempt peaceful contact, suggested Dr. Cruz. Send a signal using simple mathematical sequences to indicate non-hostile intent. And if they consider any approach hostile, countered Major Voss, we'd be exposed, vulnerable. Lieutenant Lee shook his head. We don't have sufficient firepower to engage directly. I suggest we gather as much intelligence as possible, then withdraw. After weighing the options, Hale decided to attempt communication. Dr. Cruz, prepare a simple signal indicating peaceful intentions. Let's see if we can establish dialogue before making any further decisions. Dr. Cruz crafted a message using universal mathematical constants, a sequence that would unmistakably demonstrate intelligence while hopefully conveying peaceful intent. The message was transmitted toward the Calarian fleet. The response was immediate and unambiguous. A brilliant beam of energy lanced out from the nearest dreadnought, sweeping across the orbital path of the Pathfinder. Though not directly targeted, the scan triggered the ship's semi-automated defense systems, which interpreted the energy beam as a targeting lock. Before anyone could override the system, the Pathfinder's point defense lasers fired a brief warning burst. "Cease fire! Override defense systems!" Hale shouted. But the damage was done. The Calarian fleet immediately dispatched a rapid response squadron, forcing the Pathfinder to initiate emergency propulsion to escape. "They're pursuing," reported Lieutenant Lee, as the ship accelerated away from Lyra 4. 3 destroyer-class vessels, closing rapidly. "Evasive maneuvers," ordered Hale. "Maximum speed toward the asteroid belt. We need to break their sensor lock." For the next 6 hours, the Pathfinder played a deadly game of hide-and-seek among the asteroid field surrounding Lyra 4. The superior maneuverability of the smaller human vessel gave them an advantage in the cluttered environment, and eventually, they managed to slip away from their pursuers. Once clear, Captain Hale set course back to Earth Fleet Headquarters, a journey that would take them nearly 2 months at maximum sustainable speed. During that time, Dr. Cruz worked tirelessly to compile as much information as possible about Calarian weapons technology and tactics from the brief encounter. "Their weapon systems appear to be plasma-based," she reported during one of the daily briefings. "The energy output is at least 100 times greater than our most powerful shipboard cannons, and their hull material absorbed our scanner beams with almost no reflection. Some kind of advanced metamaterial, perhaps?" When the Pathfinder finally reached Earth Fleet space, Captain Hale immediately transmitted an emergency communication to Fleet Command, requesting an urgent assembly of the Interplanetary Defense Council. An imperial power called the Calarian Empire is preparing to invade the Lyra system. Hale reported to the assembled military and political leaders. "Based on our observations and the intelligence gathered by Dr. Cruz, we believe this is the first step in a broader conquest campaign that could eventually threaten human-settled systems." The revelation sent shockwaves through the Council. Humanity had expanded to nearly 30 star systems, but had never encountered an advanced alien civilization, let alone one with imperial ambitions. "What are their capabilities?" asked Admiral Chen, the head of fleet operations. Dr. Cruz stepped forward with her analysis. "Their technology appears to be centuries beyond our own. Their warships are massive. The smallest vessel we observed was roughly equivalent to our largest battleship. Their energy weapons operate on principles we barely understand, and their defensive systems seemed impenetrable to our scanners." "And you believe they intend to conquer human worlds?" asked the Secretary General of the United Planetary Alliance. "The signals we intercepted were explicit," Captain Hale confirmed. They referred to primitive species standardization and resource extraction protocols. Their fleet at Lyra 4 appears to be an advance force, preparing the way for a larger invasion. The council deliberated for days, weighing options that ranged from attempting diplomatic contact to immediate military preparation. Major Marcus Reed, Earth Fleet's representative to the council, advocated for a diplomatic approach. "We should try to establish communication," he argued. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. We can't risk interstellar war based on a single encounter." Captain Hale disagreed vehemently. The Calarians showed no interest in communication. Their response to our peaceful signal was immediate aggression. "We need to prepare for conflict, and quickly." In the end, the Council decided on a middle path. They would prepare for military engagement while attempting to establish diplomatic contact. The interplanetary fleet mobilized every available warship, while colonial defense forces were placed on high alert. 4 months after the Pathfinder's encounter, the interplanetary fleet assembled at the edge of the Lyra system. 40 military vessels, including 20 heavy battleships, 10 escort vessels, and 10 light patrol crafts. Additionally, 60 civilian ships had been hastily converted into combat support vessels, primarily by retrofitting mining equipment into kinetic weapons. "It's not much compared to what we're facing," Captain Hale remarked to Dr. Cruz as they stood on the bridge of the UES Aegis, the fleet's flagship. "But it's everything we could gather on such short notice." "Do you think it will be enough?" she asked. Hale's expression was grim. "No, but we have to try." Intelligence reports indicated that the Calarian presence in the Lyra system had grown substantially. Over 100 warships now orbited Lyra Fu, including 20 dreadnoughts, 30 support vessels, and 50 escort ships. The force assembled was clearly intended for more than just holding a temporary outpost. The interplanetary fleet positioned itself in the upper orbit of Lyra 4 and throughout the nearby asteroid field, creating a natural labyrinth that both sides would have to navigate during battle. Captain Hale, now serving as tactical advisor to Fleet Admiral Takashi, suggested using the asteroid field to their advantage. "The Calarians rely on overwhelming firepower," he explained during the final strategy session. "In open space, they'll annihilate us. But in the asteroid field, their massive ships will be less maneuverable, and their long-range weapons less effective." The plan was to draw the Calarian fleet into the asteroid field, where smaller human vessels could use hit-and-run tactics against the larger ships. Converted mining vessels would use their industrial-grade lasers to destabilize asteroids, creating additional hazards for the enemy fleet. When the battle began, it unfolded almost exactly as Captain Hale had predicted. The Calarian fleet opened with a devastating barrage of plasma fire, attempting to clear a path through the asteroid field. The energy discharge was so intense that it temporarily blinded many of the human ship's sensors, forcing them to retreat deeper into the protection of the floating rocks. "They're trying to flush us out," observed Major Voss, who now commanded a special operations squadron. "Make us fight on their terms." "We stick to the plan," Admiral Takashi ordered. "Let them come to us." As the Calarian fleet advanced into the asteroid field, the human ships launched their counterattack. The converted mining vessels, using modified kinetic missiles, originally designed for breaking up asteroids, targeted the escort ships at the edges of the Calarian formation. The impacts weren't enough to destroy the alien vessels, but they disrupted their tight formation, creating gaps in their defensive screen. Major Voss led a special tactics team in a daring operation, using small, agile craft designed for asteroid mining. They slipped through the gaps in the Calarian formation and targeted the power stations of the second-line ships. The precision strikes caused cascading power failures in several support vessels, temporarily reducing the Calarian fleet's coordination. Meanwhile, the main battle raged throughout the asteroid field. The human battleships, though outmatched in firepower, used the cluttered environment to execute quick strikes before retreating into cover. The strategy prevented the Calarians from bringing their full weaponry to bear, but also meant that human ships had to expose themselves to devastating fire each time they attacked. The casualties mounted quickly, Within the first hour of battle, 15 human warships had been destroyed, and dozens more damaged. The Calarian losses were minimal by comparison. Only a handful of escort vessels disabled or destroyed. The turning point came when the Calarian dreadnought, Zhur-Khar, engaged directly with the UES Aegis. The human flagship, though one of the most powerful vessels in the interplanetary fleet, was dwarfed by the massive alien warship. The Aegis managed to launch several successful strikes against the dreadnought's secondary systems. But a sudden, blinding energy pulse from the Zhur-Khar overloaded the Aegis's control systems, leaving it temporarily adrift. With the human flagship vulnerable, the Zhur-Khar moved in for the kill. It was at this moment that pilot Una Park, commanding a small tactical fighter, saw an opportunity. While the dreadnought focused its attention on the disabled Aegis, Park piloted her craft directly toward the Zhur-Khar's main propulsion exhaust port, a small vulnerability identified in Dr. Cruz's analysis. "This is for Earth," Park transmitted before accelerating to maximum speed. Her fighter, loaded with mining explosives, penetrated deep into the dreadnought's propulsion system before detonating. The explosion caused a chain reaction within the Zhur-Khar's power core. Massive internal fires spread rapidly, isolating the dreadnought within a cloud of debris created by its own damaged systems. The behemoth vessel began to break apart, its structural integrity compromised by the unexpected internal devastation. When the Zhur-Khar finally exploded, the psychological impact on both fleets was profound. For the Calarians, it represented an inconceivable failure, the destruction of an invincible dreadnought by a primitive species they had intended to subjugate. For the human forces, it was a moment of desperate hope, proof that the seemingly unstoppable enemy could indeed be defeated. The interplanetary fleet seized the moment, pressing their attack against the now disorganized Calarian formation. The alien fleet, stunned by the loss of the Zhur-Khar, began a tactical withdrawal, retreating to a higher orbit around Lyra 4. The battle's immediate aftermath was both victorious and sobering for the human forces. They had succeeded in driving back the initial Calarian assault, but at tremendous cost. 25 heavy battleships destroyed, 40 escort vessels severely damaged, and thousands of personnel lost. The Calarians had withdrawn, but not before losing over 30 warships, including the prized dreadnought. In the days following the battle, the Interplanetary Defense Council convened an emergency session to assess the situation. The debate centered on whether to maintain an aggressive defensive posture or to seek peaceful negotiations with the Calarians. "They've withdrawn for now," argued Major Reed. "This gives us an opportunity to establish diplomatic contact, to prevent further bloodshed." Captain Hale, now hailed as a hero for his tactical insights that had made victory possible, disagreed strongly. "The Calarian Empire has never before encountered resistance," he said, drawing on intelligence gathered by Dr. Cruz. "They don't negotiate with species they intend to conquer. This withdrawal is temporary. They're regrouping, and they'll return with an even larger force." Dr. Cruz supported Hale's assessment. "From what we've been able to decipher of their communications, failure is not tolerated in their military hierarchy. The loss of a dreadnought to a primitive species represents a stain on their imperial honor. They won't just walk away. They'll come back determined to erase that humiliation." The Council ultimately decided to prepare for prolonged resistance. Resources throughout human-controlled space were redirected toward military production. Civilian ships were systematically retrofitted for combat roles, and a comprehensive defense network was established throughout the Lyra system and beyond. Captain Hale was promoted to admiral and given command of the newly formed Resistance Training Academy. His experience at Lyra 4 had convinced him that conventional military tactics would be insufficient against the Calarian threat. "We can't match them ship for ship or weapon for weapon," he explained to the first class of resistance fighters. "Our advantage lies in unconventional warfare, guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run strikes, and the use of civilian infrastructure in military roles. Every mining vessel must become a weapon, every asteroid field a battleground. Dr. Elena Cruz, meanwhile, compiled what became known as the Lyra Resistance Archive, a comprehensive document detailing Calarian technology, tactics, and vulnerabilities observed during the battle. The archive became required reading for all military personnel and was distributed to civilian defense forces throughout human space. Knowledge is our most powerful weapon, Dr. Cruz told a gathering of colonial governors. The Calarians expect subservience from those they conquer. They don't anticipate resistance, and they certainly don't expect that resistance to be intelligent, coordinated, and adaptive. Major Sarah Voss was promoted to colonel and placed in charge of special operations training. Her experience leading the strike team against the Calarian support ships had demonstrated the effectiveness of small, targeted operations against a numerically superior force. Size isn't everything in space combat, she instructed her trainees. Maneuverability, surprise, and precision can overcome raw firepower. The Calarians rely on intimidation and overwhelming force. We need to be the opposite, invisible until we strike, and gone before they can respond. 6 months after the Battle of Lyra IV, Admiral Hale addressed the Interplanetary Defense Council one final time before departing to establish a forward command post in the Lyra system. The Calarian Empire has existed for over 800 years, he said, his voice grave. In that time, they've conquered hundreds of worlds and dozens of spacefaring species. We are the first to have successfully resisted their initial assault, but we would be fools to think this is the end. He activated a holographic display showing intelligence reports of Calarian fleet movements in distant star systems. They're gathering a force 10 times larger than what we faced at Lyra IV. When they return, and they will return, it won't be just to conquer, it will be to eradicate. The council chamber was silent as the implications sank in. We have one advantage, Hale continued. The Calarians have never faced meaningful resistance. Their entire military doctrine is based on the assumption of quick capitulation. We've already shattered that assumption, and in doing so, we've planted a seed of doubt in their imperial mindset. Before leaving the chamber, Hale authorized the transmission of a message to all human colonies and outposts. The message was brief, but resolute. This was only the first test. The Calarian Empire will return with twice the force. Our only chance for survival is to transform every civilian ship into a weapon, every mining outpost into a fortress. The enemy expects us to be waiting for them, prepared for conventional war. Instead, we will be everywhere and nowhere, striking from the shadows, refusing to present a single target. Our sole warning to the enemy: run. In the distant reaches of space, beyond the knowledge of human intelligence services, Emperor Vexhai of the Calarian Empire received the report of the defeat at Lyra IV. For the first time in his 300-year reign, the Emperor experienced something approaching doubt. How is it possible? He demanded of the holographic projection of General Jarek, the fleet commander who had survived the battle. How could primitives destroy a dreadnought? Jarek's image flickered, whether from transmission degradation or from fear. It was impossible to tell. Their tactics were unexpected. Your radiance. They used the asteroid field to negate our firepower advantage. They employed civilian vessels in combat roles, and they targeted vulnerabilities we did not believe they could identify. Emperor Vexhai's multifaceted eyes narrowed. You underestimated them. This is unacceptable. It will not happen again. Your radiance, Jarek assured him. I have already commissioned a new fleet, 500 vessels, including 50 dreadnoughts. We will return to this Earth alliance and demonstrate the consequences of resistance. The Emperor considered this. No, he said finally. You will take 1,000 ships. You will obliterate their colonies one by one. You will make an example of these humans that will echo across the galaxy for 1,000 years. As you command, Your Radiance. As the transmission ended, Emperor Vexhai found himself staring at the tactical display showing the Lyra system. For 8 centuries, the Calarian Empire had expanded without meaningful opposition. Species after species had surrendered rather than face annihilation. The humans' unexpected victory represented more than just a military setback. It represented a dangerous idea. The idea that the Empire could be resisted, that it could be defeated. Such an idea could not be allowed to spread. The gathering Calarian armada cast long shadows across the stars, a testament to the Empire's determination to erase the stain of defeat. But somewhere, in the vast darkness between those stars, humanity prepared for the coming storm, not with resignation, but with a fierce determination born from their first taste of victory. In her new role as head of the Interstellar Intelligence Network, Dr. Elena Cruz intercepted and decoded a Calarian transmission. The message, intended for their forward bases, contained a tactical assessment of human capabilities based on the Battle of Lyra 4. She brought the decoded message directly to Admiral Hale at the Resistance headquarters, hidden within the asteroid belt of the Proxima Centauri system. "They still don't understand," she said, unable to keep a note of grim satisfaction from her voice. "They believe our victory was a fluke, a combination of luck and their own complacency. They're preparing to fight the same battle again, just with more ships." Hale studied the tactical assessments. "Then, we'll make sure the next battle is nothing like the first," he said. "Have the guerrilla squadrons been deployed throughout the outer colonies?" "Yes," Cruz confirmed. "And the civilian evacuation protocols are in place. When the Calarians arrive, they'll find abandoned settlements, and then the real fight will begin." "Good," Hale nodded. "And the Lyra archive?" "Distributed to every colonial government and resistance cell. Everyone knows what we're facing, and everyone knows it can be defeated." As they discussed the preparations, Major Zara Quinzel, the Intelligence Operations Coordinator, entered with an update. "Sir, we've confirmed that the Calarian fleet has departed their staging area. Estimated arrival in human space, 6 months." Hale absorbed this news with a calm that belied the gravity of the situation. "Then, we have 6 months to prepare the greatest resistance the galaxy has ever seen." He turned to the star map, displaying human-controlled space. "The Calarians expect to find cowering subjects. Instead, they'll find a species that refuses to kneel." On board the Calarian flagship dreadnought Corvex, General Moruk, the ground forces commander for the upcoming invasion, reviewed the battle plans with cold efficiency. "Once the orbital defenses are neutralized, we'll begin planetary landings here, and here." He indicated on the holographic display of Earth. "We expect initial resistance, but our numerical and technological superiority should ensure quick capitulation." General Jarek, still smarting from the humiliation at Lyra 3, was less confident. "Do not underestimate these humans," he warned. "They have proven resourceful." Moruk dismissed the concern with a gesture. "One battle does not make them a threat. The Empire has crushed 1,000 species more advanced than these humans. This victory of theirs was an aberration, one that will be corrected with overwhelming force." What neither Calarian general could know was that even as they planned their invasion, human resistance cells were spreading throughout nearby star systems, establishing hidden bases, stockpiling weapons, and preparing for a type of warfare the Empire had never faced. A war without front lines or set-piece battles, where every civilian was a potential combatant and every asteroid a potential ambush point. Back on Earth, the Interplanetary Defense Council had transformed into the War Cabinet, coordinating the massive mobilization effort. Industry throughout human space had been converted to military production, with an emphasis on small, agile combat vessels rather than large battleships. "We can't match their dreadnoughts," explained Lieutenant Aaron Lee, now heading the Weapons Development Division. "So we won't try. Instead, We'll build thousands of fighter-class vessels that can operate independently or in small squadrons, each one capable of delivering a knockout punch to a capital ship if it gets close enough. The strategy represented a fundamental shift in human military doctrine, away from centralized command structures and toward a distributed, cellular approach where individual commanders had broad autonomy to conduct operations based on local conditions. Colonel Sarah Voss's Special Operations Teams had expanded into a full-fledged guerrilla warfare corps, with units embedded throughout human space. They trained not only military personnel, but civilian volunteers as well, creating a resistance network that spanned dozens of star systems. When the Calarians come, Voss told her trainees, they won't be fighting an army. They'll be fighting an entire species, in the shadows, in the asteroid fields, in the atmosphere of gas giants. Everywhere they go, we'll be waiting. As the massive Calarian fleet approached human space, Emperor Vexai addressed his military commanders one final time before the invasion began. This campaign is about more than conquering another primitive species, he declared, his voice resonating through the communication network. It is about maintaining the cosmic order. The Empire has stood for 8 centuries because lesser beings understand their place in the universe. These humans have dared to challenge that order, and for that, they must be made an example. The Emperor's multifaceted eyes gleamed with cold certainty. Let no human settlement survive unbowed. Let no resistance continue unpunished. When you are finished, the very mention of Earth should evoke terror in all who hear it, a cautionary tale of what happens to those who defy the Empire. Unknown to the Emperor, his broadcast was intercepted by human intelligence vessels. Dr. Cruz personally delivered the translation to Admiral Hale. They still don't understand what they're facing, Hale remarked after reading the Emperor's speech. They think this is about subjugation and examples. They don't realize it's about survival. He turned to the assembled resistance leaders, military officers, colonial governors, civilian coordinators, all joined by a common purpose. The Calarians believe their victory is inevitable because they've never known defeat, he said. We proved them wrong once, and we'll do it again. Not because we have better ships or weapons, but because we have something they can never understand, the absolute refusal to surrender our freedom. As the Calarian fleet entered the outer reaches of human space, they encountered not the organized defense they had expected, but an unsettling emptiness. Colony after colony appeared abandoned, with no signs of military presence. They're running, General Mora concluded with satisfaction. They've seen our strength and abandoned their outposts. General Jarek was less convinced. Or they're drawing us in, he cautioned, dispersing their forces for guerrilla tactics. His concerns were validated when the first Calarian patrols began disappearing. Small squadrons sent to secure abandoned colonies simply ceased communication, their fate unknown. When larger forces were dispatched to investigate, they found only debris fields, and sometimes brief, devastating ambushes before the attackers vanished back into the darkness of space. The pattern repeated across dozens of star systems as the Calarian fleet advanced toward Earth. Conventional engagements were rare. Instead, human forces employed hit-and-run tactics, striking vulnerable targets before disappearing into asteroid fields or the atmospheres of gas giants. This isn't war as we understand it, General Jarek reported to Emperor Vexai after 3 months of frustrating progress. They refuse to meet our fleet in open battle. Instead, they bleed us with 1,000 small cuts. The Emperor's response was predictable. Then burn everything. Leave them nowhere to hide. But space was vast, and hiding places innumerable. For every human base the Calarians discovered and destroyed, 3 more operated undetected. The resistance network, built on the principles outlined in Dr. Cruz's Lyra archive, proved remarkably resilient. The conflict evolved into a war of attrition, one that favored the defenders despite their technological disadvantage. Calarian supply lines stretched thin across dozens of light years, making them vulnerable to the very guerrilla tactics they found so dishonorable. 6 months into the invasion, with Earth still beyond their reach, the Calarian High Command faced an uncomfortable reality. They were losing ships and personnel at an unsustainable rate, with little strategic progress to show for it. "We should concentrate our forces," argued General Jarek. "Abandon these peripheral engagements and strike directly at their homeworld." General Moruk disagreed vehemently. "And leave active resistance cells in our wake? They would sever our supply lines within weeks. No, we must pacify each system methodically." The strategic impasse reflected a deeper problem. The Calarian military, accustomed to swift conquests against conventional opponents, found itself ill-equipped for a protracted guerrilla campaign. Their massive warships, designed to inspire terror and deliver overwhelming firepower, proved vulnerable to swarms of smaller vessels employing unconventional tactics. On Earth, the War Cabinet received regular updates on the campaign's progress. Despite the invasion's terrible cost in human lives and infrastructure, the overall strategic situation appeared increasingly favorable. "The Calarians are adapting," warned Colonel Voss during one briefing. "They've begun breaking their fleet into smaller, more flexible battle groups, less intimidating, but harder to ambush." Admiral Hale nodded grimly. "We expected as much. That's why we've prepared the next phase." The next phase represented a strategic escalation, from passive resistance to active counterattack. Human forces began targeting Calarian forward bases and supply depots, not just patrols and isolated ships. The goal was to force the invaders to commit ever larger portions of their fleet to defensive operations, further diluting their offensive capability. Dr. Cruz's intelligence network played a crucial role in this phase, identifying vulnerabilities in Calarian logistics and communications. Her analysis of intercepted transmissions revealed growing discord within the Empire's command structure, and, more significantly, the first hints of doubt about the invasion's ultimate success. "They're beginning to question whether the campaign is worth the cost," she reported. "Not openly, of course. That would be tantamount to treason in their hierarchy. But the sentiment is spreading, especially among mid-level commanders who bear the brunt of our attacks." This insight proved invaluable in shaping the Resistance's psychological warfare campaign. Human propaganda broadcasts began targeting specific Calarian commanders, highlighting their losses and questioning the Empire's commitment to supporting its forces in the field. The war entered its second year with no end in sight. The Calarian advance had stalled light years from Earth, bogged down in an interminable campaign against an enemy that refused to present a decisive target. In his palace on the Calarian throne world, Emperor Vexai faced increasing pressure from the Imperial Council to resolve the conflict. The campaign had already consumed more resources than any previous conquest in the Empire's history, with little to show for the investment. "Perhaps we should consider a negotiated settlement," suggested one counselor, careful to frame the proposal in terms of pragmatism rather than defeat. "These humans have proven more resilient than anticipated. We could establish a buffer zone, maintain nominal control over the outer systems, and—" "There will be no negotiation," the Emperor interrupted, his voice deadly quiet. "The moment we treat with these primitives as equals is the moment we acknowledge our own weakness. The campaign continues until total victory is achieved." But privately, even Vexai had begun to question whether such victory was possible, at least at an acceptable cost. The Empire had never faced a species that so thoroughly rejected the concept of surrender, that transformed entire civilian populations into effective resistance fighters. On the front lines, the Calarian military faced a crisis of morale. Accustomed to quick, decisive victories, they instead found themselves engaged in an endless series of inconclusive skirmishes against an enemy that seemed to materialize from the void, strike with devastating precision, and vanish before effective countermeasures could be deployed. General Jarek, once the Emperor's favored commander, had grown increasingly pessimistic about the campaign's prospects. "We are fighting ghosts," he confided to his senior staff. "Ghosts who know our every move before we make it, who turn our strengths into weaknesses." His concerns were validated when a coordinated human strike targeted the Calarian Forward Command Center in the Procyon system. The attack, led personally by Colonel Voss, destroyed not only the physical infrastructure, but also the central database containing the invasion's strategic planning. The loss proved catastrophic for Calarian operations. Without central coordination, battle groups fell back on outdated protocols, operating semi-independently with little strategic coherence. The human resistance, by contrast, had been designed from the outset to function without centralized command, making it inherently more resilient. As the third year of conflict began, a significant shift occurred in the war's momentum. Human forces, growing ever more proficient in asymmetric warfare, began reclaiming abandoned colony worlds, not through conventional military operations, but through a strategy of making them too costly for the Calarians to hold. On Earth, Admiral Hale addressed the War Cabinet with cautious optimism. "We're not winning in the traditional sense," he explained, "but the Calarians are losing ships, losing territory, and most importantly, losing confidence. Their entire imperial model is predicated on the assumption of inevitable victory. We've shattered that assumption." Dr. Cruz, her once dark hair now streaked with premature gray from the strain of 3 years' continuous operations, presented her latest intelligence assessment. Intercepted communications indicate growing factionalism within the Calarian command. General Jarek is advocating for a strategic withdrawal to consolidate gains, while General Moruk continues to push for escalation. "And the Emperor?" asked one cabinet member. "Increasingly isolated," Cruz replied. "He continues to demand total victory. But his military commanders know such victory is impossible, at least with the resources currently allocated to the campaign." The implications were clear. The monolithic Calarian war machine was beginning to fracture under the pressure of a conflict unlike any it had faced before. The turning point came not in a great battle, but in a series of small retreats. Calarian forces began withdrawing from the outermost human colonies, ostensibly to establish a more defensible perimeter. In reality, these withdrawals represented an implicit acknowledgement that the Empire could not sustain operations across such a vast theater. Human resistance forces followed the retreating Calarians, harassing their rearguard and preventing them from establishing stable defensive positions. The strategy, devised by Admiral Hale and executed by Colonel Voss's special operations teams, denied the invaders any opportunity to regroup and recover. By the conflict's 4th year, the Calarian presence in human space had been reduced to a few heavily fortified systems, primarily those with resources deemed essential to the Empire. Even these strongholds faced constant pressure from resistance operations, making resource extraction difficult and costly. On the Calarian throne world, the Imperial Council finally forced the issue. In a session from which the Emperor was conspicuously absent, they voted to reassess strategic priorities in the human campaign, a euphemism for withdrawal. General Jarek, summoned to present his assessment, spoke with unexpected candor. "This war cannot be won through conventional means," he told the assembled counselors. "The humans have transformed their entire society into a resistance network. For every base we destroy, 3 more appear. For every ship we eliminate, they build 5 smaller ones." "Are you suggesting the mighty Calarian Empire cannot defeat a primitive species?" demanded one counselor, incredulous. "I am stating a military reality," Jarek replied, his multiple appendages gesturing for emphasis. "We could commit the entire Imperial fleet to this campaign and still fail to achieve total victory. The humans have developed a form of warfare for which our military doctrine has no effective counter." The Council's decision reached after days of contentious debate, represented an unprecedented admission of failure. The Calarian Empire would withdraw from human space entirely, re-establishing its frontier at the Lyra system, the very place where the conflict had begun. Emperor Vexi, when informed of the Council's decision, fell into a rage that claimed the lives of 3 senior advisors. But even his near-absolute authority had limits. The military leadership, faced with the prospect of an unwinnable war, quietly aligned itself with the Council's position. The withdrawal took place over several months, presented to the Empire's population as a strategic redeployment, rather than a retreat. Human forces maintained pressure throughout the process, ensuring the Calarians had no opportunity to leave behind hidden outposts or surveillance networks. As the last Calarian warships departed human space, Admiral Hale stood on the observation deck of the UES Defiant, watching the energy signatures fade from the long-range sensors. "They'll be back," he said to Dr. Cruz, who stood beside him. "Maybe not tomorrow or next year, but eventually. The Empire can't tolerate the idea of a species that successfully resisted them." "We'll be ready," Cruz replied. "Not just militarily, but culturally. The Lyra Archive has become more than a tactical manual. It's a testament to what humanity can achieve when united against existential threat." Hale nodded thoughtfully. "That's the true victory here. Not driving them out, but transforming ourselves in the process. We're no longer just a collection of colonies and outposts. We're a unified civilization with a shared purpose." In the aftermath of the Calarian withdrawal, humanity faced the monumental task of rebuilding. Dozens of colonies lay in ruins, their infrastructure destroyed by the fighting or by Calarian scorched earth tactics during their retreat. Millions of people had been displaced, and countless others had given their lives in the resistance. Yet, amid the devastation, a new sense of purpose emerged. The war had forced humanity to innovate, to develop technologies and strategies that might otherwise have taken centuries to evolve naturally. The distributed defense network, initially created out of necessity, became the foundation for a new approach to interstellar governance, one that balanced central coordination with local autonomy. Dr. Cruz's Lyra Archive expanded throughout the conflict to include not just military tactics, but social organization principles, became a blueprint for this new society. Its core message, that freedom required eternal vigilance, resonated across human space. Colonel Voss, her special operations experience now directed toward reconstruction efforts, led the establishment of the Interstellar Guard, a decentralized force designed to maintain the guerrilla warfare capabilities developed during the conflict, ensuring humanity would never again be vulnerable to imperial aggression. 5 years after the Calarian withdrawal, Admiral Hale addressed the graduating class of the newly established Interstellar Defense Academy. His hair had gone completely white, but his eyes retained the intense focus that had helped guide humanity through its darkest hour. "The peace we enjoy today was purchased at tremendous cost," he told the assembled cadets. "Not just in lives lost, but in the innocence we sacrificed. Before the Calarians, we explored space with open hearts and minds, seeking knowledge and connection. Now, we must balance that spirit of exploration with the wisdom of caution." He gestured toward the memorial wall behind him, where the names of those lost in the conflict were inscribed. These heroes gave everything to ensure that humanity would remain free to chart its own course among the stars. But their sacrifice will be meaningless if we forget the lesson of Lyra IV, that freedom must be defended with unwavering resolve. As the ceremony concluded, Hale found himself approached by a young cadet, the daughter of a resistance fighter who had given her life in the liberation of the Procyon colonies. "Admiral," she asked, her expression earnest, "do you think the Calarians understood why they couldn't defeat us?" Hale considered the question carefully. "No," he said finally. "I don't think they ever truly understood. Their empire is built on the assumption that power flows from technology, from massive warships and devastating weapons. They couldn't comprehend a strength born from the simple, unshakable refusal to surrender one's freedom. He smiled slightly, seeing in the young woman's determination an echo of the spirit that had sustained humanity through its greatest trial. And that's why, should they ever return, our warning remains the same: run. Because this time, we won't be fighting for survival. We'll be fighting to ensure they never threaten us again. In the vast darkness of interstellar space, at the edge of what had once been the frontier of human exploration, automated beacons maintained a constant vigil. Positioned along the border established by the Calarian withdrawal, they monitored for any sign of Imperial return. And embedded within their programming, repeating endlessly into the void, was humanity's defiant message, not just to the Calarians, but to any empire that might contemplate conquest. We are humanity. We have faced extinction and emerged stronger. We have transformed every civilian ship into a weapon, every mining outpost into a fortress. We are everywhere and nowhere. Our sole warning: run. Beyond that border, in the silent depths between star systems, the gathering shadows of the Calarian fleet watched and waited. The humiliation of defeat had not been forgotten, merely deferred. One day, they would return, and on that day, they would discover whether humanity's warning had been mere bravado or the simple statement of an uncompromising truth. But for now, an uneasy peace prevailed. Humanity rebuilt, remembered, and prepared, knowing that their freedom had been purchased, not just with blood and sacrifice, but with the unbreakable spirit of resistance that had transformed a collection of colonies into a unified civilization with a single, resolute voice. A voice that had spoken to the stars and declared, "We will not be conquered. We will not be subjugated. We will fight to our last breath for the right to determine our own destiny." And in the end, that declaration had proven more powerful than all the warships of an ancient empire.